They say the bond breaks with a bang. Mine broke with a whisper. I stood in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by 500 people pretending not to notice. The music continued to play, the violins scratching out a melody that was supposed to be romantic, while my husband, my mate, my alpha, spun across the floor with another in his arms. He was not a mistress. It was worse. It was a declaration. Every glance he threw Ezra's way, every smile that should have been mine, every whisper in his ear was a knife, not in my back, in front of me, before the entire court, before everyone who swore loyalty to me as Luna. Kalen Blackwood was erasing me, and he expected me to weep. I could feel it through the bond, that invisible cord that connected our hearts. He wanted my tears. He wanted my screams. He wanted me to make a scene, to completely humiliate myself, so he could comfort me afterward and feel generous. I felt the exact moment I decided not to give him that satisfaction. The cold started in my fingers. It climbed up my arms. It wrapped around my chest like armor made of ice. And when it reached the place where the bond was burning like a bonfire, I did something I never thought I was capable of doing. I extinguished it. Not with anger. Not with pain. With something much worse. Indifference. Kalen stopped in the middle of the ballroom. I saw the exact moment he felt it. The moment the bonfire that connected us turned to ash. His golden eyes widened, searching for mine through the crowd. I smiled at him. A perfect, empty, frozen smile. And then I turned, grabbed a glass of wine and offered it to Ezra with the grace of a queen who has nothing left to lose. Because I had nothing left. If you want to know how I reached that moment and what happened afterward, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Come with me. This story is mine, but now it is yours too. To understand that night, you need to know the woman I was before. The woman who loved too much. The woman who believed that love was enough. I loved Kalen Blackwood since before I knew what love was. Not the fairy tale love, full of flowers and poetry. The love I felt was made of simple things. The way he frowned when he read reports. The sound of his laugh echoing through the halls of Blackwood Keep. The warmth that radiated from his body when we slept embraced. My head on his broad chest, listening to the heart that beat in sync with mine. I was an Omega. In the world of wolves, that meant little. Omegas were the weakest in the hierarchy, those who bowed their heads, those who served. When the moon goddess marked me as the mate of the supreme alpha of the Blackwood clan, half the kingdom thought it was a mistake, an insult, a cruel joke of fate. Kalen never made me feel that way. At least, not at first. He looked at me as if I were the only star in an infinite sky. He touched me as if I might break, but also as if I were the most precious thing he had ever held. In the first 3 years of our reign, I believed we had the kind of love that survives wars and centuries. I was wrong. The change was gradual, so slow that I didn't realize until I was drowning. First, there were the silences. Conversations that used to last hours became short, functional phrases. Then came the absences, meetings that stretched into the early morning, diplomatic trips that didn't require my presence. And finally, the looks. No longer adoration, but something that resembled impatience, as if I were a piece of furniture he had grown tired of seeing. I tried to talk to him. I tried to ask what had changed. Kalen always deflected. He said I was imagining things, that the pressure of the throne was great, that he loved me. Of course he loved me. How could I doubt it? And I believed him, because believing was easier than facing the alternative. The alternative arrived at the eclipse ball. It was the most important celebration of the year for the Blackwood clan. The night the moon disappeared completely, leaving the world in the hands of the stars. Tradition dictated that the Alpha and the Luna would open the festivities with the first dance, a symbol of the union that protected the clan. I spent hours preparing. I chose a silver dress, fabric that seemed made of solidified moonlight. I pinned my brown hair into elaborate braids, interwoven with small white flowers. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, and for the first time in months, I felt beautiful. I descended the main hall stairs with a heart full of foolish hope. The ballroom was magnificent. Floating candles illuminated the high ceiling, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. Tables overflowed with food and wine. 500 wolves dressed in their finest clothes talked and laughed, waiting for the arrival of the royal couple. I searched for Kalen in the crowd. I found him near the throne, but he wasn't alone. Ezra was by his side. Young, bright, ambitious. The new counselor Kalen had hired 6 months ago, a minor nobleman who had risen quickly in court thanks to his sharp intelligence. He was handsome, I admitted. Black hair, green eyes, a smile that seemed calculated to charm. I had never worried about him. Kalen was my mate. The bond connected us in ways that transcended the physical. No counselor, however brilliant, could threaten that. How foolish I was. The music began. The violins played the traditional melody, and all eyes turned to us, expecting the alpha to seek his Luna for the first dance. Kalen didn't look at me. He extended his hand to Ezra. The world stopped. I saw the faces around me contort in shock. I saw mouths opening in scandalous whispers. I saw Gideon, the beta, close his eyes in an expression of pain, as if he knew exactly what was happening and couldn't stop it. And I watched Kalen lead Ezra to the center of the floor, spinning with him beneath the floating candles, smiling as if I didn't exist. The pain was physical. It started in my chest, a vice that stole my air. It descended to my stomach, a hot nausea that threatened to double me over, and then it rose to my throat, a scream that I would not release. Through the bond, I felt Kalen. I felt the cruel satisfaction emanating from him. He wanted this. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted me to run to him weeping, begging, humiliating myself before everyone so he could magnanimously forgive me. He wanted to break me so he could rebuild me in the image he desired. And in that moment, standing at the top of the stairs while my husband danced with another, I understood something I should have realized long ago. Kalen didn't love me. Perhaps he never had. Perhaps what he felt for me was only possession, the pride of having a mate marked by the goddess. And now that the novelty had passed, now that I was no longer a shining trophy, he wanted to diminish me, to turn me into something small and insignificant, a shadow he could ignore when he wished. The ice was born in my heart at that moment. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was survival. My wolf, that part of me that was always wiser than I was, understood that continuing to love that man would be my destruction. So she did what she needed to do. She closed the door. The bond between us, that bonfire that had burned for 3 years, went out. Not with violence, with silence, like a candle that simply stops burning when the oxygen runs out. I walked down the stairs. Each step was an exercise in control. My spine straight, my chin lifted, my eyes dry. The guests moved aside to let me pass, and I could feel their pity, their embarrassment, the morbid curiosity of those watching a disaster unfold. I did not give them the satisfaction of a scene. I crossed the room to where a servant held a tray of wine. I took 2 glasses, and then I approached Kalen and Ezra, who had stopped dancing and watched me with very different expressions. Ezra looked uncomfortable, almost guilty. Kalen looked frustrated. I offered a glass to Ezra. "Congratulations on the dance," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "You make a beautiful pair." Ezra swallowed hard. "My Luna, I don't... Please." I smiled, that empty smile that would become my armor. "Enjoy the night. It is a celebration after all." I turned and walked toward my throne. I sat down with the grace of a queen who has nothing to prove, and I ordered the music to continue. The rest of the night passed in a gray blur. I performed my duties. I spoke with nobles, accepted compliments, smiled when necessary. Inside, I was hollow. The place where the bond used to burn was now a cold emptiness, and every time Kalen tried to reach me through it, he found only mist. When I finally withdrew to our chambers, he followed me. The door had barely closed when he exploded. "What the hell was that?" His voice was a snarl, his golden eyes shining with rage. "You humiliated me in front of the entire court." I looked at him, truly looked, and I saw a stranger. "I humiliated you?" The question came out soft, almost curious. "Interesting. Don't play innocent, Selene." He approached, his large body casting shadows on the walls. "That little show with the wine, that fake smile. You wanted to make me look like an idiot." I should have yelled. I should have thrown things, wept, demanded explanations. That's what he expected. That's what he wanted. Instead, I yawned. You don't need to try so hard, Kaylin. I walked to the bed and began to undo the braids in my hair. I got the message. What message? What are you talking about? I lay down. I pulled the covers up to my chin, and I closed my eyes. Celine. He grabbed my arm. Look at me when I'm talking to you. I opened my eyes. I met his, and I let him see exactly what was inside me now. Nothing. Kaylin recoiled as if I had slapped him. His hand dropped my arm. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Good night, Alpha. I turned my back on him. Sleep well. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt when he left the room. I felt when the door slammed. I felt when his furious footsteps retreated down the corridor. And then, alone in the darkness, I allowed a single tear to trace a path down my face. Only one, because it was all he deserved. The next morning I packed my things. Not many things. A few dresses, books, the perfumed oils I used in my hair. Things that were mine before the wedding, before the bond, before Kaylin Blackwood decided I was disposable. The West Tower stood in the most isolated corner of Blackwood Keep. Centuries ago, it was used to confine members of the royal family who had gone mad or fallen from grace. The chambers were austere, the windows narrow, the walls too thick to let in sunlight. It was perfect. Marta, my personal maid since I became Luna, helped me move. Her eyes were full of questions she was too wise to ask. When we finished arranging the small room, she held my hands. My lady, she whispered. Are you sure about this? I looked around. The gray stone walls, the narrow bed covered in plain sheets, the extinguished fireplace. It was so different from the royal chambers, with their silks and tapestries and constantly burning hearths. Absolutely, I replied. Marta nodded. She didn't argue. She didn't try to convince me to go back. She just squeezed my hands one last time and left, closing the heavy door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening, and exactly what I needed. The first few days were the hardest. Not because of the physical discomfort. I had grown up in a simple village before being recognized as the Alpha's mate, and luxuries were never a necessity for me. What was destroying me was the emptiness. The bond, when it was active, was like a second skin, a constant awareness of Kaylin's presence, his moods, his location. I always knew when he was happy, when he was irritated, when he was thinking of me. It was comforting in a way I hadn't realized until I lost it. Now, where there was once warmth, there was only mist. I would wake up early, my hand automatically searching for the body that should be beside me. I found only cold sheets and the painful memory of what it was like to sleep in the arms of someone I believed loved me. The world lost its colors. It wasn't a metaphor. It was literal. Bonded wolves experienced the world more intensely, the colors more vivid, the scents stronger, the sounds sharper. When the bond broke, all of that disappeared. The sky that was once a vibrant blue now seemed gray. The garden flowers, which I used to admire for hours, were pale, lifeless blurs. I wondered if Kaylin was experiencing the same thing. The answer came on the third day. I was in the council room, reviewing the harvest reports the administrators had prepared. It was tedious work, full of numbers and projections, exactly the type of task that kept my mind too busy to think of other things. The door opened without warning. Kaylin entered like a storm. His golden eyes were bloodshot, the deep shadows darkening his handsome face. His hair, normally impeccable, was disheveled as if he had run his hands through it 1,000 times. You moved. It wasn't a question. I continued reading the report in my hands. Celine. He slammed his palm on the table, making the papers fly. Look at me. I raised my eyes slowly. I met his with the same empty expression I had perfected that night of the ball. Can I help you with something, Alpha? The formality hit him like a slap. I saw his shoulders tense, his jaw clench. Why did you move to the West Tower? That's practically a prison. The royal chambers seemed too big for one person. I returned my attention to the papers. If there's nothing else, I have work to do. Work? He laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. You're running from me, Celine. Avoiding me like I'm a leper. I didn't answer. I just kept reading, marking numbers with a quill. pretending that every word of his wasn't a knife twisting in an open wound. Damn it, Celine. He circled the table and grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to face him. Talk to me. Scream, cry, hit me, anything. I looked at his hands on my shoulders, then at his face contorted with frustration. And then, with a calm I didn't know I possessed, I said, "Release me, please. You're wrinkling my dress." Kalen released me as if I burned him. He stepped back 2 paces, 3. His eyes searched mine with an expression I couldn't decipher. Desperation, maybe. Or fear. It was hard to tell when everything looked so gray. "What happened to you?" he whispered. "Where is the woman I knew?" The answer rose in my throat, bitter as poison. "You killed her." But I didn't say it. Instead, I stood up, gathered the scattered papers, and walked toward the door. "The harvest reports indicate a surplus of wheat this year," I said, without turning around. "I recommend we store the extra for winter. With your permission, Alpha." The door closed behind me before he could answer. The weeks dragged on like years. I performed my Luna duties with mechanical efficiency. I signed treaties, organized festivals, mediated disputes between noble families. The clan members looked at me with a mix of pity and admiration, whispering about the glass Luna who had replaced the Alpha's devoted wife. I pretended not to hear. Kalen tried to reach me in increasingly desperate ways. He sent flowers to the West Tower, flowers I returned unopened. He appeared at council meetings with transparent pretexts, seeking any excuse to be near me. Once I found him standing in the corridor leading to my chambers, like a ghost haunting his own domains. Every attempt was met with the same response: politeness, distance, ice. I knew he was suffering. Even with the bond closed, I could see the signs. The sleepless nights etched on his face, the tremor in his hands when he signed documents, the way he avoided the royal chambers, preferring to sleep in the office or the armory. A part of me, that foolish part that still loved him, wanted to run to him, wanted to cup his face in my hands and say that everything would be all right, that we could fix this together. But I knew the truth. If I gave in now, if I showed any weakness, Kalen would learn that he could hurt me without consequences, that I would always be there to forgive him, no matter what he did, and I refused to be that kind of woman. I preferred to be ice than a doormat. At the end of the 3rd week, Gideon sought me out. The beta of the Blackwood clan was a massive man, almost as large as Kalen, but with a kindness his alpha lacked. He had been Kalen's friend since childhood, the brother the royal lineage never gave him. I found him waiting at the entrance to the West Tower, his arms crossed over his broad chest. "Luna," he greeted. "Gideon." I stopped a respectful distance away. "Have you come to convince me to return to the royal chambers?" He smiled, but it was a sad smile. "No, I came to ask you not to give up completely." I raised an eyebrow. "Give up on what?" "Him," Gideon sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "I know what he did, Celine. I saw it with my own eyes at the ball. And I know you have every right to hate him." "I don't hate him," I said. And it was true. Hatred required energy I no longer possessed. I simply don't feel anything anymore. The confession seemed to hurt him more than any accusation. He lowered his eyes, and when he looked back at me, there was something akin to pleading on his face. "He is destroying himself," Gideon said. "I found him yesterday in the armory, too drunk to stand, talking to the air. He spends nights in your chambers, even though he knows you won't return. He sleeps hugging the old sheets, trying to catch any lingering trace of your scent." The image struck me with unexpected force. Kalen, the all-powerful alpha, hugging empty sheets like a lost child. For a moment, the ice around my heart cracked. But then I remembered the ball, his smile while he danced with Ezra, the humiliation burning in my veins while 500 people watched. The ice reformed. "And what do you expect me to do, Gideon? That I run back just because he is suffering the consequences of his own choices?" "No." He looked at me with surprising intensity. "I expect you to understand what he did and why, not to forgive him, but to decide if he's worth trying for." I crossed my arms. "Then explain it to me. Why did my mate decide to humiliate me before the entire clan?" Gideon hesitated. For a long moment I thought he wouldn't answer. But then he spoke, the words coming out slowly, as if each one cost him something. Kalen has spent his whole life proving he was worthy. Worthy of the throne. Worthy of the clan. Worthy of the title of Supreme Alpha. He fought, bled, and killed to get where he is. Gideon paused. And then you appeared. An Omega from a forgotten village, marked by the goddess as his perfect mate. You were everything he didn't deserve. Kind, gentle, patient. And instead of being grateful, he started to fear. I frowned. Fear what? That you would realize the truth. Gideon looked into my eyes. That he's not as strong as he pretends to be. That beneath the title and the claws, there is a man terrified of not being enough. So he did the only thing he knew how to do. He destroyed me first. I completed. He tried to diminish you to feel bigger. It's pathetic, I know. It's unforgivable, perhaps. But it's not because he doesn't love you. Gideon stepped closer, lowering his voice. It's because he loves you so much he's afraid of you. The words hung between us like smoke. I wanted to believe it. A part of me, that stupid, hopeful part, desperately wanted to believe there was an explanation, that Kalen wasn't simply cruel, that our love could still be saved. But another part, the part that had learned to survive, knew the truth. Explanations don't erase wounds. Motives don't heal betrayals. And love, no matter how deep, was no excuse for destruction. I heard you, Gideon, I said finally, and I appreciate you coming here. But understanding why he did it doesn't change what he did. I know. He nodded, his shoulders dropping. I just wanted you to know the truth before you made any decisions. He turned to leave but stopped at the tower entrance. He looked at me over his shoulder. He told me something last night, while he was too drunk to lie. He said the bond is silent, that he tries to reach you but only finds mist, that it's like trying to breathe underwater. I didn't answer. He said he preferred you screaming to this silence. Gideon smiled, a bitter smile. I replied that a queen doesn't fight for a place that is already hers. She simply leaves to build another kingdom. He disappeared into the darkness of the corridor, and I was left alone with his words, echoing in the walls of my cold tower, wondering if anything remained of the kingdom Kalen and I had built together, or if everything had already turned to ash. The news arrived on a morning of heavy skies. Rurik, Alpha of the Bone Clan, had crossed the northern border. He came with an entourage of 50 warriors, officially to negotiate trade treaties. But everyone knew the truth. The Bone Clan didn't negotiate. They smelled weakness like wolves smelled blood. And apparently, they had caught the scent coming from Blackwood. I was in the library when Gideon brought the message. My eyes scanned the parchment once, twice, absorbing the implications. Rurik was known for his brutality. His clan lived in the frozen mountains of the north, where survival was a daily battle against nature and against themselves. They respected no diplomacy. They only respected strength. The Alpha requests your presence in the war room, Gideon said, his voice carefully neutral. I raised my eyes from the parchment. My presence? Since when does Kalen include me in military matters? The question was unfair, and I knew it. Kalen had always included me in important clan decisions. It was I who had pulled away in recent weeks, locking myself in the West Tower like a willing prisoner. Gideon did not answer. He just waited, infinite patience on his tired face. I sighed. Tell the Alpha I will be there shortly. The war room was a place I had avoided since the ball. Walls covered with maps, a massive oak table in the center, chairs occupied by generals and counselors. And at the head of the table, on the smaller throne reserved for strategy meetings, sat Kalen. He looked even worse than Gideon had described. The dark circles had deepened, darkening the golden eyes that once shone with arrogance. His skin, normally tanned by the sun, was pale as old parchment. And when he saw me enter, something crossed his face, something that looked like desperate hope. I looked away. Luna? He stood up, the title sounding strange on his lips. Thank you for coming. It is my duty. I took my place to the right of the throne, maintaining a respectable distance. What do we know about Rurik's intentions? The meeting lasted for hours. The generals debated defense strategies, troop placement, escape routes in case the negotiation failed. I listened in silence, absorbing every piece of information, my mind working in parallel while my face remained impassive. Rurik was dangerous. That was obvious. But there was something else in the reports that bothered me. The timing of his visit. The exact number of warriors he brought. The insistence on meeting in the main fortress, not neutral territory. He knew something. The entourage arrived the following evening. I stood beside Kaelin when the gates opened, fulfilling my role as Luna even though every fiber of my being wanted to be anywhere else. The north wind brought their smell before we could see them. Tanned leather, dried blood, something wild and primitive that made my wolf instinctively recoil. Rurik led the procession. He was exactly as the stories described. Huge, even larger than Kaelin, with shoulders as broad as fortress gates. His face was a network of scars, each telling a story of survived violence. His eyes were glacial gray, cold as the mountains he came from, but it was his smile that chilled my blood. It was the smile of a predator who had found wounded prey. Alpha Blackwood. Rurik dismounted from his black horse with surprising grace for a man of his size. It is an honor to finally set foot on your lands. The honor is ours, Alpha Rurik. Kaelin's voice was controlled, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. I hoped the journey was smooth as it can be, traversing such civilized territories. Rurik pronounced the word as if it were an insult. His eyes swept the courtyard, the guards positioned, the walls, and then they landed on me. I held his gaze. Rurik approached. Each step was deliberate, predatory. He stopped less than a meter away, too close for comfort, too far to be considered a direct threat. And then he smelled the air. The gesture was obvious, purposeful. His nostrils flared, his head tilted slightly, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise first, then cruel amusement. Interesting, he murmured. Kaelin moved, positioning himself between Rurik and me. Is there a problem, Alpha? Problem. Rurik smiled again, that wolf's smile circling a lamb. No, just curious. His eyes met mine over Kaelin's shoulder. Your Luna doesn't carry your scent, Blackwood. No trace of mating. Almost as if the bond had been... He paused, savoring the moment. Severed. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt the eyes of everyone in the courtyard. Guards, servants, members of Rurik's entourage. All listening. All judging. The humiliation of the ball had been private compared to this. Kaelin stiffened. Matters between mates are private. Of course. Rurik stepped back, his hands raised in false surrender. Forgive my indiscretion. It's just that, where I come from, an unmated Luna is considered available, and I have been seeking a mate for years. A woman with your Luna's composure and intelligence would be a valuable prize. The growl that escaped Kaelin was more animal than human. For an instant, his eyes flashed with that intense gold that preceded the transformation. I placed my hand on his arm. The touch was instinctive, automatic. I didn't even think before I did it, but the effect was immediate. Kaelin froze, his breathing calming, the glow in his eyes receding. Rurik observed the interaction with calculated interest. Fascinating, he said. The Glass Luna still holds some power over her alpha, after all. The Glass Luna. The nickname hit me like a slap. Cold, fragile, transparent. That was exactly how he saw me. Exactly how the world saw a Luna whose mate had publicly rejected her. I released Kaelin's arm. Let's continue this conversation in the negotiation room, I said, my voice perfectly controlled. Dinner will be served in 2 hours. I am sure Alpha Rurik wishes to refresh himself after the long journey. Rurik tilted his head, a gesture that could have been respect or mockery. The Glass Luna also has ice on her tongue. I admire that. He walked past us toward the castle, his warriors following him in silent formation. Kaelin turned to me. Celine, not now. I didn't look at him. Not now. The negotiations took place the next morning. The room was large, with an oval oak table in the center, and tall windows that let in the gray light of the cloudy day. Rurik sat on one side with 2 of his counselors. Kaelin and I sat on the other, with Gideon positioned behind us. The discussions were about trade routes, passage fees, non-aggression pacts, dry topics that would normally bore me. But I was alert, every sense sharp, waiting for the blow I knew was coming. Rurik hadn't come here to negotiate. He had come to test. The morning dragged on. Arguments were presented and rebutted. Concessions were offered and refused. And all the while, Rurik watched me. Not Kaelin. Me. As if he was measuring something I couldn't see. It was near noon that everything changed. "There is one last matter," Rurik said, leaning back in his chair. "About the Luna." Kaelin stiffened. "The Luna is not up for discussion." "Ah, but she is." Rurik smiled. "You see, Alpha Blackwood, in my clan, an unmated Luna is considered available. And I have been seeking a mate for years. A woman with your Luna's composure and intelligence would be a valuable prize." Kaelin's growl echoed through the room. "Are you suggesting—" "I am offering." Rurik leaned forward. "An alliance sealed by mating. I take your Luna. You gain unrestricted access to the northern mines. It is a fair deal." I should have felt fear. I should have been horrified by the idea of being traded like merchandise. But all I felt was a freezing rage, crystalline, sharp as an ice blade. "No," I said before Kaelin could answer. Rurik raised an eyebrow. "Does the Luna speak for her Alpha?" "The Luna speaks for herself." I stood up, facing those gray eyes without flinching. "And the answer is no. I am not merchandise to be negotiated. I am not a prize to be won. And I am certainly not weak enough to accept the leash of a man who has to buy his mates, because none would choose him willingly." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Rurik stood up slowly. His smile had vanished, replaced by something much more dangerous, something that looked like hunger and fury mixed. "The glass Luna has claws after all," he said softly. "Pity she'll have to learn that glass claws break. It all happened too fast." Rurik's hand moved in a blur. Something gleamed in the light of the windows. Metal cutting the air, aimed straight for my chest. And then Kaelin was in front of me. The sound he made when the dagger struck his chest would be etched into my memory forever. A grunt of pain mixed with something that sounded like relief, as if he had been waiting for that moment, as if he were glad to receive that blade. He fell to his knees. I caught him before he hit the floor. My arms wrapped around him, his weight nearly knocking me down. The dagger was buried up to the hilt in his chest, dark blood spreading across the fabric of his tunic. "Kaelin." My voice was a strangled whisper. "Kaelin, look at me." He looked, not at the dagger, not at Rurik, who was being subdued by Gideon and the guards, only at me. "I'm sorry," he murmured, blood bubbling on his lips. "I'm so sorry, Celine. For everything." The ice around my heart cracked. It didn't shatter. It didn't melt. But it cracked. A fine fissure running across the surface, letting in a pain I had locked away for weeks. "No," I said, the tears finally coming, the first since that night of the ball. "You are not going to die. You are not allowed to die." Kaelin smiled. It was the first true smile I'd seen from him since before everything started to fall apart. "Always bossy," he whispered. "My Luna." And then his eyes closed. I screamed. For the first time in weeks, I screamed. I screamed for doctors, for healers, for anyone who could help. I screamed until my throat was raw and my hands were covered in the blood of the man who had destroyed my heart. The man who had given his life to save mine. The wall of ice was cracking, and I didn't know if I wanted to fix it or let it fall. I took him to the West Tower. I don't know why I made that choice. There were better equipped rooms, with healers and servants available. But when the guards asked where to carry the Alpha, the words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. My tower, my bed, my care. Lazarus, the clan's elder shaman, examined the wound with experienced fingers. His wrinkled face revealed nothing as he studied the dagger still buried in Kaelin's chest. "Northern venom," he said finally. "Extracted from the serpents that live in the crevices of the ice mountains. Slow, painful, almost always fatal. Almost." The word echoed in my mind like a promise and a threat. "What needs to be done?" I asked. Lazarus looked at me with those ancient eyes that seemed to see much more than anyone should see. "The venom needs to be extracted. It is a long, painful process. The fever will rise. He will become delirious, and someone needs to stay with him, keeping him alive until the body expels the toxin. How long? 3 days, maybe 4. He hesitated. If he survives. I looked at Kalen lying on my narrow bed, his face pale as wax, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The blood had already soaked the sheets, the metallic smell filling the small room. He will survive, I said. Tell me what to do. Lazarus taught me. He showed me how to prepare the bitter herbal compresses that needed to be changed every hour. He explained how to clean the wound with boiled water and root tincture that burned like fire. He left vials of potions that needed to be administered at specific times, each one more bitter than the last. And then he left, and I was alone with the man who had broken my heart. The first night was the worst. The fever spiked at nightfall, turning Kalen into a human furnace. His skin burned beneath my fingers as I changed the compresses, sweat soaking the sheets I had just changed. He groaned, incomprehensible words escaping cracked lips. I worked in silence. I washed his face with damp cloths. I dripped water between his lips when he was quiet enough. I changed the bandages on the wound, trying not to look at the lacerated flesh, at the hole Rurik had opened in his chest. The smell was unbearable. Dried blood, fever sweat, bitter herbs that made my eyes water. I should have felt disgust. I should have called someone else to take my place, but I couldn't leave. Around midnight, he began to speak. Celine. My name came out like a prayer, repeated over and over. Selena, don't go. Please don't go. I paused, the damp cloth suspended above his forehead. I'm here, I said softly. I'm not going anywhere. He didn't hear me. He was lost somewhere between consciousness and the abyss, fighting demons I couldn't see. I ruined everything. The words were clipped, mixed with groans of pain. I always ruin everything. My father was right. I don't deserve... Kalen. I held his face in my hands, forcing him to calm down. You need to rest. You're too good. Tears streamed from the corners of his closed eyes. You were always too good for me. I looked at you and saw everything I would never be. Gentle. Patient. Loved by everyone without having to demand it. My heart squeezed. I was so afraid. His voice was a thread, fraying at the edges. Afraid that you would realize it. That you would see that beneath the title, the claws, the power, I was just... nothing. A frightened boy pretending to be king. I should have stopped listening. They were words of fever, confessions ripped out by delirium, things he probably wouldn't remember saying. It wasn't fair to listen. But I couldn't stop, so I tried to diminish you. He choked, coughing blood. If you were smaller, maybe I wouldn't feel so small. If you cried, begged, needed me, maybe I would feel important. The confession was pathetic, cruel, too honest to bear, and it explained everything. It didn't forgive. Nothing could forgive what he had done. The humiliation, the pain, the weeks of ice that had transformed me into someone else. But it explained. And for some reason, that mattered. I love you. The words came out as a sob. I love you so much that I hate myself for it, because I knew you deserved more. And instead of being more, I dragged you down. I didn't answer. I just kept wiping his forehead with the damp cloth, hoping the fever would break, the delirium would pass, that this endless night would finally end. Kalen grabbed my hand. Even feverish, even weak, his grip was strong. His eyes opened, clouded with pain, but focused on me with desperate intensity. If I die, he whispered, I want you to know. I never touched Ezra, never wanted him. It was just theater, stupid cruelty to make you react. He coughed again, blood staining his lips. You were the only one, always the only one. I closed my eyes. The tears came, and this time I didn't try to stop them. They streamed down my face in silence, falling onto our intertwined hands, onto the stained sheets, onto the wreckage of what we had once been. Sleep, I said, my voice hoarse. You need to sleep. His eyes closed. The grip on my hand loosened, and I stayed there, holding him in the darkness, wondering if the man who woke up would be the same one who had fallen. The second day brought more fever, more delirium, more confessions I didn't want to hear. Kalen spoke about his childhood, about a father who never showed affection, who saw love as weakness and punished any sign of emotion, about a mother who died too soon, leaving him alone in a world of claws and dominance. He spoke about the constant fear of not being enough, of being discovered as the fraud he believed himself to be, of losing everything he had gained because, deep down, he didn't deserve any of those things. And he spoke about me, about the first time he saw me, an Omega in a simple dress at a presentation ceremony, how his wolf had howled with recognition, how his heart had stopped for an instant, before racing like never before, about the fear that followed, fear that I would reject him when I discovered who he really was, fear that my kindness was a mask, a manipulation, something that would be used against him, and about the terrible decision he had made, to destroy me before I could destroy him, to make me hate him before I could disappoint him. It was so stupid, so tragically, pathetically stupid. And it was exactly the kind of thing a frightened boy pretending to be king would do. On the third day, the fever broke. I was asleep in the chair beside the bed when I felt movement. I opened my eyes and found Kalen watching me. His eyes were clear, tired, but lucid, the gold I knew so well, shining faintly in the morning light that entered the narrow window. "You stayed," he said. His voice was rough, raspy from so much groaning during the fever. Someone had to change the bandages. He looked around. At the small room, the gray stone walls, the narrow bed where he lay, at the basins of dirty water, the blood-stained cloths, the empty potion vials. "Your tower," he said. "My tower." Silence. Kalen tried to sit up. He groaned as pain shot through his chest. I automatically stood up to help him, adjusting pillows behind his back, and only realized what I was doing when I felt the warmth of his body beneath my hands. I stepped away. "Celine." He extended his hand, but didn't touch me. He just left it suspended in the air between us, an offer I could refuse. I remember what I said, during the fever. Every word. I crossed my arms. And I meant all of it. He lowered his hand, his shoulders slumping. I was a coward, a cruel idiot who hurt the only person who truly loved me, and there is nothing I can say or do to erase that. "No," I agreed. "There isn't." He nodded, accepting the blow. "So what happens now?" I looked at him, at the man who had destroyed my heart, and then given his life to save me, at the all-powerful Alpha who sat in my humble bed, weak as a pup, awaiting my judgment. And I made a decision. "Rurik declared war when he attacked you," I said. "The Bone Clan will march against us in weeks. Blackwood needs a united Alpha and Luna, or we will be destroyed." Something sparked in Kalen's eyes. "Hope. Are you saying—" "I am saying that I will be your partner in war." I cut him off before he could get ahead of himself. "I will fight alongside you, plan alongside you, and protect this clan alongside you, because it is my duty. And the rest?" I met his eyes. I let him see exactly what was inside me, the pain that was still there, the love that refused to fully die, and the wall of ice protecting all of it. "The rest you burned, Kalen. The moment you chose to humiliate me before 500 people, you burned everything we had." I walked toward the door. "Perhaps one day we can rebuild something from the wreckage, but that day is not today." I opened the door. "Celine." His voice stopped me. "Thank you, for taking care of me, for not letting me die." I looked at him over my shoulder. "You jumped in front of a dagger for me. It was the least I could do." I hesitated. "Rest. War is coming, and I need my Alpha on his feet." I left before he could see the tears that insisted on returning. The wall of ice was still there, but the cracks had spread, and for the first time, I didn't know if I wanted to mend them. The war came faster than we expected. 2 weeks after the attack, our scouts sighted the Bone Clan army marching through the northern valley. Rurik had wasted no time. He knew Kalen was wounded, knew our clan was divided, and saw the perfect opportunity to destroy Blackwood once and for all. I was in the war room when the news arrived. Kalen had not fully recovered. He could stand, he could walk, but the wound in his chest still limited him. I saw the pain on his face every time he took too deep a breath, saw the tremor in his hands when he held his sword for too long. He was not ready for a battle. But Rurik didn't care about that. 5,000 warriors, Gideon announced, pointing to the map spread across the table. At least 500 are war alphas. The rest are light infantry and mounted archers. Kaelin studied the map with tired eyes. How many do we have? 3,000. Maybe 3,500 if we call up the border villages. The numbers didn't lie. We were outnumbered almost 2-1. Even with Kaelin in peak form, it would be a difficult battle. With him injured, it would be a massacre. We need a direct attack, Kaelin said, his voice rough. Concentrate our forces at the vanguard and charge them before they can organize. I closed my eyes. That was exactly the kind of strategy he would choose. Brute force, direct confrontation, blood against blood. It worked when we had the numerical advantage. Now, it would be suicide. No. All heads turned to me. Kaelin frowned. No? I stood up and walked to the map. My fingers traced the path Rurik's army would follow. The northern mountains, the narrow valley, the gorge that led to the Blackwood Plains. A direct attack is exactly what Rurik expects, I said. He knows you are wounded. He knows you will want to prove you are still strong. He is counting on it. Then what do you suggest? Kaelin's voice was tense, but not hostile. He was listening. The gorge. I pointed to the narrow pass between two mountains. It is the only viable path for an army of that size. The rock walls are too steep to climb, and the bottom is narrow enough to force a column formation. Gideon approached, studying the point I indicated. Are you suggesting an ambush? I am suggesting we use the terrain to our advantage. I looked at the generals around the table. Rurik expects to meet us on the plains, where his numbers make a difference. But if we intercept him in the gorge, the limited width negates the numerical advantage. It doesn't matter how many warriors he has, if only 10 can fight at a time. The generals exchanged glances. I could see resistance in some faces, doubt in others. A Luna giving military orders was not common in Blackwood. It was not common anywhere. Kaelin broke the silence. Continue, he said. What else? I took a deep breath. Rurik is arrogant. He doesn't respect intelligence, only force. We can use that. I pointed to the gorge walls. We position archers on the upper edges, hidden among the rocks. When his army enters the gorge, we attack from above. Incendiary arrows first, to create panic. Then, our infantry closes the entrance, trapping them inside. A trap, Gideon murmured. A trap. I met Kaelin's eyes. He came here expecting a battle of muscles. We will give him a battle of minds. Silence. The seconds dragged on. I felt the weight of the gazes on me, the tension in the air, the doubt that hung like a storm cloud. And then Kaelin smiled. It was a small, tired, but genuine smile. The first true smile he had directed at me since that night of the ball. You heard the Luna, he told the generals. Prepare the troops. We march at dawn. The following days were a whirlwind of preparation. I worked side by side with the generals, refining the plan, anticipating possible flaws. Kaelin watched me in silence, following my orders without question, trusting me in a way he never had before. We didn't talk about us. There was no time. But something was changing. I saw it in the looks he gave me, in the way he maintained a respectful distance, never invading my space, never demanding more than I was willing to give. He was learning to wait. We marched on the morning of the third day. The gorge was a half-day's journey from the keep. We arrived at nightfall and positioned the troops according to plan. Archers on the upper edges, hidden among rocks and bushes. Infantry at the southern entrance, ready to close the trap. And at the northern end, waiting for Rurik's army, were Kaelin and I. The night passed in tense silence. I didn't sleep. I alternated between checking positions and studying the horizon, waiting for the first sign of the enemy army. Kaelin stayed by my side, his presence solid and comforting despite everything. Are you nervous? He asked sometime in the pre-dawn hours. I looked at him. The distant torchlight illuminated his face, highlighting the lines of exhaustion, the paleness that still lingered. He looked older than he was, more vulnerable, terrified, I admitted. He nodded. Me too. The great Alpha Blackwood, terrified. I couldn't contain the tone of irony. The great Alpha Blackwood just discovered that his Luna is smarter than he will ever be. He glanced at me sideways, and that maybe, just maybe, he should have listened more and spoken less. I didn't answer, but something warm ignited in my chest, a small spark piercing the layers of ice. The sun rose red, and with it came Rurik's army. They marched through the gorge like a serpent of steel, armor reflecting the bloody light of the dawn. Rurik led the vanguard, mounted on a black horse that seemed made of shadows. Even at a distance, I could see the confident smile on his face. He thought he had already won. I waited. Every muscle in my body screamed to give the order, to end that unbearable tension. But I waited. I let more and more warriors enter the gorge, let the serpent stretch out and become vulnerable, until there was no turning back. Now, I said. Gideon raised his arm. A series of horn blasts echoed through the rock walls, and hell descended upon the Bone Clan. The incendiary arrows cut the sky like a shower of falling stars. They struck the enemy column with deadly precision, spreading fire and panic. Screams echoed through the gorge, men and horses struggling in flames, the perfect formation dissolving into chaos. At the southern entrance, our infantry advanced. Shields raised, spears pointed, closing the trap like the jaws of a giant wolf. Rurik was caught. I saw the moment he realized it. The confident smile vanished, replaced by incredulous fury. He roared orders, trying to reorganize his men, but it was too late. The gorge had become a meat grinder, and his army was the meat. "With me!" Kalen unsheathed his sword, his eyes glowing with that intense gold that preceded the transformation. "For the moon! For Blackwood!" He charged forward. I hesitated for an instant. The strategist in me wanted to stay behind, coordinate the troops, maintain a broad view of the battlefield. But the wolf in me howled for blood, for vengeance, for ending this once and for all. The wolf won. I ran after Kalen, plunging into the chaos of the battle. The fight was brutal. Bodies crashed. Blades sliced flesh. Blood soaked the stony earth. I wasn't a trained warrior, not like the soldiers around me, but I had something they didn't. A mate fighting beside me. Even with the bond closed, Kalen and I moved in sync. When an enemy attacked from the left, he was there to block him. When another advanced from behind, my dagger found his throat before he could strike. It wasn't the mystical bond guiding us. It was trust built in crisis. Rurik found us in the center of the chaos. He had dismounted at some point, his black horse lost in the confusion. Blood covered his face, but his eyes were the same. Cold, cruel, hungry. "The glass Luna," he snarled, advancing. "I will finally discover how you break." Kalen put himself between us. "You'll have to go through me first." With pleasure. The two crashed together like colliding storms. It was brutal. It was visceral. It was everything a fight between alphas should be. Claws and teeth manifested, the partial transformation making them more animal than human. The sound of flesh being torn echoed above the din of the surrounding battle. Kalen was losing. The wound in his chest limited him. Every sweeping movement wrung a groan of pain from him. Rurik noticed this, and struck exactly where it hurt. Each blow calculated to reopen the wound, to drain Kalen's strength drop by drop. I had to do something. My hand found the dagger at my waist. Small, practically useless against an Alpha Rurik's size, but I didn't need to kill him. I just needed to distract him. I waited for the right moment. Rurik raised his arm for the final blow, claws gleaming. Kalen dropped to his knees, blood pouring from his chest. Rurik's eyes shone with triumph. I attacked. The dagger sank into the back of Rurik's knee, severing tendons. He roared in pain and surprise, stumbling sideways. For an instant, his eyes met mine. It was enough. Kalen rose. His claws sliced through Rurik's throat in a single fluid, accurate, fatal movement. Blood spurted. The alpha of the Bone Clan fell to his knees, his hands trying uselessly to hold on to the life escaping him. "Glass Luna," he choked, blood bubbling between his lips. "Defeated by a..." He didn't finish the sentence. His body slumped. The Bone Clan army saw their leader fall. And then, One by one, they surrendered. The battle was over. I stood among the bodies when I heard the first howl. It came from somewhere to my left, then another to the right, and another, until the entire gorge echoed with the sound of wolves howling in unison. But they were not howling for Kaelin. They were howling for me. Soldiers knelt as I passed. Warriors covered in blood bowed their heads in reverence, and the howls continued. A recognition that went beyond words, beyond titles. The glass Luna had saved the clan. Kaelin approached. He was covered in blood, his own and others. The wound in his chest reopened, but his eyes were clear. And there was something in them that I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. He knelt before me, the supreme alpha of the Blackwood clan, the most powerful man in the kingdom, knelt in the blood and mud before all his warriors. "My sword is yours," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "My strength is yours. My wolf submits to your command." He raised his eyes, and I saw tears mixed with blood on his face. "I am yours, Celine, if you still want me." The silence was absolute. Thousands of eyes watched me, waiting for my response. The wind blew through the gorge, carrying the smell of blood and smoke and something that felt like hope. I looked at that kneeling man. I thought of the ball, the humiliation, the weeks of ice, the dagger he took from me, the feverish confessions, the trust he had placed in me during the battle. I thought of everything he had destroyed, and everything he was trying to rebuild. "Get up," I said. He obeyed, his eyes never leaving mine. "You broke my trust, Kaelin. You broke my heart. You nearly destroyed everything we had." I took a step forward. "It will take time to rebuild. More time than you would like. And it won't be easy. I know. But," I extended my hand, not to touch him. Just an offer. A beginning. "I am willing to try." His eyes widened. The hope that shone there was almost painful to see. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, Celine." I didn't answer. I just let my hand remain extended, a fragile bridge over the chasm that separated us. He took it, and the howls around us echoed through the mountain, celebrating not just the victory, but something more important, a new beginning. The next morning was born golden. It was the kind of dawn that seemed impossible after so much darkness. The sky painted itself in shades of amber and pink, the clouds opening like curtains to reveal a sun I hadn't seen in weeks. A real sun, not that pale gray sphere that had replaced the colors of my world. I was on the West Tower balcony when I noticed. The colors had returned. The blue of the sky was vibrant, almost painful in its intensity. The flowers in the garden below glowed in reds and yellows I had forgotten existed. Even the gray of the fortress stones looked richer, deeper. The bond was still closed. I could feel the wall I had built, solid and intact. But something had changed. Something inside me had begun to awaken. Footsteps behind me. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. Even without the bond, I knew the sound of those steps, the weight of that presence. Kaelin stopped a few meters away, respectful, waiting. "You're awake early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." I continued looking at the horizon. "You should be resting. The wound hasn't fully healed." "I know." He approached, but maintained his distance. "But I needed to talk to you." I turned. He looked different in the morning light. Clean, shaved, wearing simple clothes instead of battle armor. The dark circles were still there, and the paleness lingered, but there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Peace. "Then speak," I said. He took a deep breath. I saw the tremor in his hands, the hesitation in his body, the all-powerful alpha, nervous as a pup before his first moon. "I made a decision," he said. "About us." My heart squeezed. "What decision?" "I set you free." The words dropped between us like stones in still water. "What?" "I set you free." He met my eyes, and the pain there was real, deep, gut-wrenching. "If you want to leave, Gideon has already prepared an escort. Horses, provisions, enough gold to start a new life anywhere you choose. You can go to the southern kingdom, to the eastern islands, anywhere away from me." I couldn't breathe. "Why?" was all I could say. Kaelin took a step forward, then stopped, as if fearing to cross an invisible line. "Because I spent 3 years trapping you without realizing it. tying you to my side with the bond, with the title, with obligation. And when you tried to be free of me, I hurt you to pull you back." His voice trembled. "I would rather die of missing you than live trapping you, Celine. If staying by my side means feeling trapped, then I let you go." Silence. The wind blew across the balcony, carrying the scent of flowers and dew. Somewhere in the keep, wolves howled in celebration of the victory. Life continued around us, indifferent to the world that was crumbling and rebuilding between the two of us. I looked at that man. I saw the frightened boy he had been, the insecure tyrant he had become, the broken man trying to rebuild himself before my eyes. I saw every version of him, every layer, every mask and every truth hidden underneath, and I saw something else. I saw someone who was finally placing my happiness above his own possession. That was love, not the possessive, suffocating love he had offered before, not the love that needed to diminish me to exist, but real, mature love, the kind that can open its hands even when the heart begs to hold on. The wall of ice around my heart trembled. It didn't collapse. It didn't melt instantly like in fairy tales, but it trembled, cracks spreading like spider webs, light beginning to penetrate for the first time in weeks. I walked up to him. Kalen remained motionless, barely breathing, as if any movement might scare me away. His eyes followed my every step with a mixture of hope and terror that made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. I stopped before him. So close I could feel the warmth emanating from his body, see the quickened pulse in his neck, hear the ragged breathing he tried to control. "Would you truly let me go?" I asked softly. "Yes." The word came out as a contained sob. "Even if it destroyed me." I raised my hand. He closed his eyes, expecting a blow, expecting rejection, expecting the pain he believed he deserved. My fingers touched his face. Kalen shuddered. His eyes opened, meeting mine, and what I saw there took my breath away. It wasn't the arrogant alpha. It wasn't the cruel king. It was just a man, vulnerable, imperfect, desperately in love, a man who had learned to love the right way, too late. Or perhaps I thought, at the exact right moment. "I'm not leaving," I said. The tears streamed down his face before he could stop them. They fell onto my fingers, warm and salty, the first time I had ever seen Kalen Blackwood weep. "Celine, it will still take time," I continued. "It will still hurt. I will still need space, patience, proof that you have truly changed. It won't be easy. I don't want easy." He held my hand against his face, as if he feared I would pull it away. "I want you, only you, for as long as you need." I smiled. It was a small, hesitant smile, the first true smile I had offered him since that night of the ball. And then I did something I hadn't planned to do. I reopened the bond. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was like opening a door that had been closed for too long, letting the light into a dark room. The connection flowed between us, warm and alive, and suddenly I could feel everything. Kalen's pain, his love, the regret consuming him, the hope trying to be born, the fear of losing me again. Everything was there, raw and exposed, without masks, without defenses. And he could feel me too. My wounds, my caution, the love that still burned beneath the ashes, refusing to fully die, the fragile attempt to trust again. The sensation was like the first breath after drowning. Kalen gasped. His hands gripped my shoulders, not to trap, but to anchor himself. I felt the wave of emotions that crossed the bond, so intense it almost knocked me down. "You're back," he whispered. "I can feel you. You're back. I was always here." I placed my hand over his heart, feeling the accelerated beats beneath my fingers. I was just protecting myself. Never again. He covered my hand with his. "Never again will you need to protect yourself from me. I swear, Celine. By the moon. By the blood. By my life." I didn't reply with words. Instead, I rose on my toes and touched my lips to his. The kiss was soft, hesitant, a test more than a declaration. But when Kalen responded, his arms enveloping me with a gentleness I didn't know he possessed, something inside me finally quieted. There was still work to be done. There were still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild, a long road ahead before we could return to what we were before. But for the first time, I believed we would get there. We separated. Kalen rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed, breathing as if he had just emerged from deep waters. "What happens now?" he asked. I looked at the horizon, at the sun rising over a kingdom we had saved together, at the forest beginning to bloom again, at the mountains shining with fresh snow, at the world that seemed more alive than I remembered. "Now," I said, "we rebuild. Together." He smiled, a true smile, full of hope and promise. "Together," he repeated. And when the sun finally rose completely, bathing the balcony in golden light, I knew that the Alpha King had learned the most important lesson of all. You do not command the sea. You do not command the wind. And you do not command a woman's heart. You merely thank it for allowing you to sail alongside it. Thank you for being here and for joining me for another story. I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you want, leave your comment. I love reading what you feel and think after each episode. Thank you for the love, and see you in the next story.